Greetings, beautiful people. My name is Jan Blake, and this is your Friday Dilemma. Once upon a time, there was a princess who did not want to marry any of the men that her mother and father suggested she should take as a husband. She wanted to make her own choice, which was her right. So, the great and the good were sent for from the four corners of the kingdom. They came, and they would sit and discourse with the princess, the king, and the queen. That way they would get an idea of what kind of men the princess was interested in. But none of these men seemed to meet her needs. Now, in the middle of a forest and a lake, there was a huge python. This python had the ability to shapeshift, and this python knew about the princess. So, deciding to try his luck, he emerged from the lake, changed himself into a man, and headed towards the city. When he presented himself to the guards at the palace gates, they had a feeling that he might possess some qualities the princess would be interested in. He was very handsome, he was very strong, his skin was lustrous, it drank the sunlight, it was beautiful, he shone, so they let him in. He sat with the princess, the king, the queen, and they enjoyed conversation and food and this and that. And as the king and the queen talked to him, and as the princess listened to him, as she laughed at the things that he said that was funny, as they engaged in deeper conversation, the king and the queen exchanged glances. This was the one. The princess agreed, and a marriage was arranged. After all the festivities and the celebrations, the married couple were escorted to the consummation house. Now, these houses had flat roofs, and so the consummation was supposed to take place on the roof. Up they climbed, and the dying voices of the celebration went off into the distance as husband and wife finally were faced with each other. He undressed her, she undressed him. They regarded each other's beautiful bodies. And then he couldn't help himself. His snaky nature came to the surface, and out came his tongue, and he began to lick her. He licked her all over her body. She was trembling with delight. And as he went closer and closer, he couldn't help it. His snaky nature completely absorbed him, and he opened his jaws. He swallowed her down. He was ashamed. Turned himself back into a snake, slithered off the roof, slithered through the palace grounds, out and along the road back to the lake. The next morning, the whole family came to welcome them down from the roof, but they didn't emerge. Guards were sent up to find out what happened. There was no sight or sound of the princess and the new prince. "Where do we look? Well, where do we search?" said the king. "Don't worry," said the advisor. "I know who to send for." So they sent for the seeker. And he, with his keen nose, he fell on his knees and he began to sniff the earth. He followed the scent of the snake all the way to the edge of the lake. And then he said, "I've lost the scent." I don't know what to do," said the king. Don't worry, said the advisor. He sent for the drinker. The drinker swallowed down the entire contents of the lake, slurping. And when he finished, he wiped his mouth, but there was no sign of the princess. Then they sent for the digger. And he, with his hands, which were as big as plates, as big as shovels more like, he began to dig down into the mud, but there was no sign of the princess. What there was, though, was a small hole in the wall of the lake. So the advisor sent for the stretcher, and the stretcher put his hand into that hole, and he stretched and stretched. He got hold of something. It was the python's tail. He pulled and he wrenched that snake out of that hole, and it had the head of the man who'd married the princess. The king was disgusted. He drew his sword, cut off his head, and then he ran the tip of the sword up the body of the snake, opened it up, and there, within the great maw of the snake, was the princess, quite dead. The king began to mourn for the life of his daughter, but the advisor said, don't worry, I'll send for the medicine man." The medicine man came, and he had some special herbs, and he had some special words, incantations, secret they were, so I can't tell you what they were. And he sprinkled these special herbs on the princess, said his incantations, and little by little, she revived. She sat up and she looked around, and recognizing her father, threw himself into his arms. And he was so delighted that he said, "The one who restored my daughter to me, He will be the one I reward. Now, all of these men had all done their part, so they began to argue. Well, it was me, said the seeker. Well, it was me, said the drinker. I think you'll find it was me, said the digger. No, it was me, said the stretcher. And me, said the medicine man. No one could decide. What do you think? Who of all these people was the one who restored the princess to her father, the king?